What happens if the euro collapses? Why Italy may have the last laugh? And should you be buying gold? It's almost certain at some point in the future we'll see the collapse of the euro currency. You know, we have heavily indebted countries across Europe, countries on the brink of collapse. We have countries like Italy, like Greece, like Spain, like Portugal. All of these countries are on the edge of collapse and all verging on tearing down the euro currency as a whole. Now, the real problem with the European Monetary Union is this is a highly ideological project. You know, they don't want to see this monetary union fail. They don't want to see countries being kicked out of it because it undermines the wider European Union project. You know, the politicians, this is highly ideological for them. They want to keep this project going at all costs. However, the real danger, history proves, that when politicians get together, they have an ideology that they want to keep going at any and all costs. It almost certainly will mean the complete destruction for whatever they're trying to make work, because, you know, just reality goes out the window. At this point, countries like Greece, like Italy, like Spain, they should be ejected from the monetary union, but the politicians won't allow this because this is now highly ideological. Now, if we see the collapse of the Eurozone currency, this is a real bad state of affairs. You know, this will be combined likely with a sovereign debt crisis that sweeps across Europe. We see the bankruptcy essentially pretty much every country in Europe, including the UK. This will include countries that are outside the Eurozone as well. So likely include the UK and other European countries that don't necessarily use the Eurozone currency themselves. Now, this is really a worst case scenario. However, looking at current events and how things are going forward and how the politicians don't seem to be tackling the root cause of these problems, I think the worst case scenario actually also is a highly probable scenario, which is very worrying. Now, if we see the complete collapse of the euro currency, you know, all these countries are going to have to go back to their original native currencies. So you're going to see the reinstatement of the Deutschmark. There'll be the lira in Italy, you know, the franc in France. All these countries are going to have to go back to their original currency. But the markets aren't then going to just trust another fiat currency, a currency essentially backed by nothing that only works on faith, because they'll only have just seen the collapse of one fiat currency. So they're unlikely going to trust another one. In this scenario, we'll likely see the dollar collapse. You know, there could quite likely just be global contagion around the world of all fiat monies as people just lose faith in the global government's ability to back a sound currency. You know, once people lose, money only really works off faith. If it's not backed by anything, it only works off the faith that a dollar today will be worth the same as a dollar tomorrow. Once that faith is gone, you know, the currency is essentially worthless. Now, if we see European countries having to pick themselves up by their bootstraps, they're going to probably have to do this by backing their currency with tangible assets. Now, gold has long been the real asset, a test of time. You know, people can talk about cryptocurrencies or commodity-backed currencies. Gold has always been the tried and tested currency that has worked. It's worked for thousands of years. It's been a currency for about 3,000 years. It has a long pedigree of working. Now, if we see this global collapse, it's almost certain that gold will just surge in value. You know, we're not talking about $1,500, $2,000 an ounce gold. Gold could go, just pick a number, just pick a very big number, and that's how high gold could go. There's no point in even trying to put a number on how much gold could be worth. You know, $20,000, $50,000, $100,000, $250,000 US dollars per ounce. Who knows? There's no point even trying to pick a number because this is real uncharted territory. We don't know how high gold could go. But if we look around Europe and we look at how much each country has in its reserves of gold, we can probably factor in how well it could transition from away from a collapsed euro, return into a native currency. Now, Switzerland is the largest holder of gold in the world. It has 1,040 tons of gold. Now, the total tonnage of gold is irrelevant because obviously the USA has more than Switzerland on just based on total tonnage, but Switzerland is the largest holder of gold per capita. That's what the real factor is. You know, it's irrelevant in saying America has a lot of gold because per capita it doesn't really have as much gold as other countries. Switzerland is by far and away the number one country in the world per capita for gold holdings. So I'll give you a run through. This isn't an extensive list of every Eurozone country. You know, for a start, Switzerland isn't in the Eurozone, but I'm putting that one in there as a barometer to see what a very fiscally sound country does in terms of its gold reserves versus maybe more reckless countries. And you might be quite interested in who's in the list. This isn't a total extensive list of every Eurozone country, but let's take a look at it. So Switzerland by far and away, 123 grams of gold per person. Germany has 40.5 grams of gold per person. And quite interestingly, Italy has 40.1 grams of gold per person. Now, Italy really is a sick man of Europe. Really, it should have been ejected from the Eurozone project a long time ago. But if we see a total collapse of the Eurozone currency and we see countries having to pick themselves up by their bootstraps, Italy is in a very strong position because it essentially has the same per capita reserves of gold as Germany. France has 36.3 grams, Netherlands has 35.7, Austria 31.8, Belgium 19.9, Greece 10.5 grams, which, that's not really enough. It's not enough, but it's certainly better than what you would consider maybe more fiscally sensible countries. We haven't got to the UK yet. Spain 6 grams of gold, Poland 5.9, and look, all the way trailing back down there is the UK with 4.6 grams of gold. The UK is widely considered one of the richest countries in Europe. Obviously, we don't use the Eurozone currency, but if you're watching this video from the UK, maybe you want to consider at least maybe try and get hold of about 40 grams of gold yourself. I know that's easier said than done. If you're just a normal average person, it's the same as me. Gold is an expensive item to be buying, but you can buy a gram of gold through websites, about 40 pounds for a gram. So maybe just buy 1-2 grams here and there a month. But certainly, look, this is shocking stuff, especially in the UK. Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister, famously sold off a large portion of the UK's gold reserves when gold hit a rock bottom price. So the UK doesn't really hold much gold. But what's quite interesting to take away from this is countries like Italy, who are really seen as the sick men of Europe. Essentially, if we see a total collapse of the Eurozone currency, this is going to decimate every country in Europe, but certainly the countries that hold larger amounts of gold are certainly going to be in a better position to reinstate their native currency and try and get things going again. This is really going to be terrible times. This is a very extreme scenario, the total collapse of the Eurozone without any period to transition to a new currency. This is really an extreme outcome, but unfortunately the extreme outcome is also a probable outcome because politicians across Europe aren't really doing anything to tackle these huge problems we have in the system. Now, as another interesting stat, you can work out roughly how much gold there is in the world per capita. Now, the total above ground gold in the world, so this is gold that's held by everybody. This is gold that's held by central banks. This is gold that your auntie has in a necklace. This is the total amount of gold that's estimated to have been mined out the ground is now above surface. There's approximately 193,472 tons above ground. Now, if we assume a world population of around 7.7 billion, that works out approximately there's about 25 grams of gold per person in the world. So maybe you want to consider, if you're a bit worried about the future and you're thinking, look, things aren't really going well, gold historically has a strong track record. I'm not saying put all your money into gold, obviously not, but maybe 5-10% of your savings you want to have in precious metals, maybe spread across gold and silver. There's approximately 25 grams of gold in the world per capita. Maybe you want to consider that as a target for yourself. If you can get high as 40 grams, or maybe even higher as what the Swiss hold, obviously in a central bank, but per capita of 123 grams of gold. Basically, we're living in possibly doomsday times. I don't want to sound this as just being a complete gold bug scare video, but we live in very, very worrying times. If you can afford it, maybe put £40 aside each month, and maybe after 2 or 3 months, buy 2-3 grams of gold through a website. These websites hardly make any money. Spot price at the moment trading for gold is about 38.5 pounds a gram. You're buying at 40-41, you're barely buying above spot price, so it's a very efficient way of buying it. Essentially, obviously, the more gold you buy, the cheaper it becomes. But in my opinion, it's prudent for anybody in the world to be holding at least some portion of their savings in gold, because essentially you can't necessarily rely on your country to do it. It's quite shocking in the UK, only 4.6 grams of gold per person per capita. That is insane. at today's prices, that's barely anything. That's 120, 160 pounds. It's nothing. Obviously, in a doomsday scenario, really expect gold essentially to go to the moon. Maybe let me know in the comments, how high do you think gold will go? Or do you think I'm wrong? Do you think this Eurozone project will succeed? Will we see gold essentially becoming worthless as the fiat countries succeed, and maybe long-term crypto? Who knows? Let me know your thoughts on this one. I thought it was just an interesting one anyway, about per capita gold reserves. Italy quite strong up there, so if we do see a total collapse of the Eurozone currency, maybe Italy could be the last man laughing. They're up there with Germany in terms of gold wealth. They're basically on par with Germany. So it's Jason from Liberty Bunkers signing off, and I'll see you in the next video.